At the ongoing UNESCO-backed regional conference on Lake Chad, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has warned the world will pay dearly if the Lake Chad is allowed to dry up. Lake Chad has shrunk by 90% in the past 4 decades, mostly due to a combination of climate change and mismanagement. The lake is the main source of fresh water for 40 million people, mainly in Nigeria, Niger, Chad and Cameroon, and 4 others. But as it dries up and hunger rises, the region has become fragile. Immigration and resettlement has intensified as farmers and fishermen have been confronted with leaner harvest, while pastoralists move out in search of water and food for their cattle. The conference ended today with the regional leaders deciding the options available to them and save the lake if there is a political will to go ahead. I'm Rotimi Michael Kelly, and the News Night begins right now. But first, let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Herdsmen crisis deepens as former commissioner and 13 others have been killed in Adamawa, northeast Nigeria. But train crash horror in Egypt. At least 16 people have been recorded killed and 20 more injured. And Rwanda film Imfura wins Silver Bear for short film jury prize at Berlin Festival Awards. Now, to take a look at the Lake Chad discussions further with me tonight is Engineer Sulaiman H. Adamu, Nigeria's Honorable Minister of Water Resources. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for joining us on News Night.
Good evening.
Can you tell us in specific, what is Nigeria's role in ensuring the revitalization of the Lake Chad?
Well, first of all, it's good to understand that Nigeria, you know, the Lake Chad borders 4 countries, but Nigeria's territory takes a larger share of the original lake as it was, and therefore we bear a lot of the brunt of the shortage, the shrinkage of the lake. That is one. Number 2, the serious ecological disaster that has been the shrinkage of the Lake Chad has created a lot of socioeconomic problems in the region, and everybody now knows that one of the reasons why Boko Haram has flourished is because they have ready recruits from the Lake Chad region because of loss of opportunities for young people, and therefore they've become easy targets for recruitment. Now, Nigeria, even before this security crisis, has always wanted to kind of promote the well-being, if I may say, of the lake. Nigeria was forefront in the formation of the Lake Chad Basin Commission in 1964, I think. Subsequently, Nigeria invested a lot of money in the South Chad irrigation area in around the 1970, 72, 73, which was expected to cultivate about 60,000 hectares of irrigation land for wheat cultivation. Now all that is lost because the intake of that for that irrigation project was at one point in 1973, but now the intake where you draw the water has had to be moved more than 30 kilometers farther down, which means the lake has shrunk by more than 30 kilometers rather. It means the intake has been moved further inwards as the lake has been shrinking. That goes to show you. Imagine a lake is here and then you find that it's 30 kilometers now or more further in. So that's quite a serious problem. So we've lost that investment. Sometimes when the season is good, we've been able to cultivate maybe as much as only 7,000 hectares. So all these things, we have social reasons, we have economic reasons, we have security reasons, and we have political reasons as well. And in recent years, at least in the maybe last 10, 15 years, there has been some move by the Lake Chad Basin Commission countries to now do something. And a study was initiated because some experts had given the idea, they brought a concept that the only way to save the lake is probably to bring in water from the Congo Basin, where about over 50% of
now
the
that's going to be a huge investment.
Oh, definitely. So Nigeria made a commitment of $5 million to begin the very first study that was done, a pre-feasibility study. And so what we are doing now is just an extension of what we've been doing, and now there is a strong commitment from President Muhammadu Buhari to really do something about the shrinkage of the lake, and therefore we are giving it more impetus.
You know, a lot of people have perhaps frown at the response, the kind of response you get from neighboring countries. They're not showing enough seriousness, they're not showing enough commitment to the revitalization of the lake. Nigeria has always taken the forefront. Now with this conference, what kind of cooperation are you getting from them?
Well, things have changed, I must tell you. Member countries of the Lake Chad Basin Commission are equally committed because they are also bearing the security brunt. Of course, and the ecological and environmental degradation that is also there. But the good thing is that there was a kind of apprehension years ago when the idea was first mooted by member countries of the Congo Basin. But that has also changed. There's a commitment from the DRC. And today, at the high-level meeting, the president of Gabon was here, and Angola sent a representation. And the CISCO, the sister commission similar to Lake Chad Basin Commission for the Congo Basin, were also represented at this conference. And they've all made a commitment that they are willing to support this interbasin transfer project. And studies had been conducted, which are being reviewed, and the concept is being looked at again. We also got a boost from the Italian government. They today announced a donation of 1.5 million euro towards the continuation of the studies. So we're making progress.
And apart from the Italian government, do you receive any other aid from perhaps international organizations like the United Nations, United States, or the United Kingdom?
Well, the United Nations is very much involved. They were part of this conference. UNESCO is an agency of the United Nations, and they were partners in the organization of this conference. Beyond that, we have the World Bank, we have African Development Bank. They have been doing quite a number of interventions on adaptation, climate adaptation strategies, climate resilience action plans, and so on. And they've been doing quite a number of projects. But these, in my view, are short to medium term interventions. The fact is, if something is not done in the next 40, 50 years, we may wake up one day and there is not a drop of water in that lake.
Now, as the conference draws to a close, what are the resolutions that have been passed, perhaps, or what are the meeting points? Do you have a common ground that all the member nations and interested parties have reached?
Oh, sure. First of all, we wanted to do this conference. We were expecting two outcomes. Number one, a general consensus, an international consensus that the lake must not be allowed to go extinct. We got that. Second thing we wanted was an international consensus that the only way to save the lake is to bring in water into the lake from somewhere. That
How practicable is that?
the pre-feasibility study that was done has shown that it's technically feasible to do that project, but it's quite an expensive thing. We are now trying to make it a Pan-African issue, so that even bring in the private sector. There are lots of opportunities that can be derived from that project. But the project is a long-term project. It's not something that can be done in 2-3 years. The study alone might take as much as 3 to 5 years before you break ground. And but we still feel, even though it's such a long stretch, but it's better for us to do something. All countries that have developed today were doing a lot of forward thinking. They were thinking 100 years ahead. So we're planning something for the future. And
some may also argue that you have a large volume of water just within the bight of Nigeria, the continental shelf of Nigeria, maybe in the Atlantic Ocean, for instance, which some people may say is shorter than to go and draw water from the Congo.
No.
Is that one of the possibilities?
No. First of all, Lake Chad used to be the 6th largest freshwater lake in the world. So the water in the Lake Chad is fresh water. The water in the sea is saline water. It's full of salt. That's one. Secondly, topography. You're going down to sea level. The energy you require to pump water up across watersheds, across the Cameroon Mountains, across the Jos Plateau, it's you can't imagine it. What we are looking for is a system of a little bit of pumping or tunneling and a lot of gravity flow. And the only way we can achieve that is through the water transfer from within the Congo Basin. And we're looking at it seriously.
Well, thank you, Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Honorable Engineer, let me use the word, Engineer Sulaiman Ichadamu, for coming on Newsnight this night. We hope that as the conference draw to a close, all the countries responsible will definitely show true commitment so that the Lake Chad Basin can, come back and will not be allowed to dry up.
We're very upbeat about it, and we hope now is the beginning of a new era for the international community, the other countries that have been skeptical, to see the need to resuscitate Lake Chad from the human angle, because the lives of 40-45 million people are involved, and that number will keep rising over the years. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
The decision of the National Executive Committee of Nigeria's ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, to extend the tenure of its National Working Committee, led by National Chairman John Odigi Oyegun, by 1 year, is now subject of controversy. The controversy arose from allegations that the decision is in violation of the party's constitution. In a statement issued on Tuesday night, the chairman of the APC Governors Forum and Zamfara State Governor Abdulaziz Yare described the decision as a mere expression of interest, as it only at the National Convention of the party that a constitutional amendment can be carried out to extend the tenures of the executives. Citing Article 13 of the APC Constitution, which empowers the NEC to carry out the functions of the convention, the party had explained that the tenure extension was to avert a pre-election crisis that might arise from the multiple congresses and convention ahead of the 2019 elections. The National Publicity Secretary of the APC was in the Arise News studios earlier today, and my colleague Aniyi Oyelowo asked him if the decision was constitutional and what the absence of one of its leaders, Ahmed Bola Tinubu, mean.
Well, thank you, but I think attempt to personalize this as an extension of tenure for John Oyegun is not exactly correct. What happened yesterday was an extension of tenure for a period of 12 months, starting from June 30th this year, when the substantive tenure of all executive officers of the party at the state and the national level will expire. So as from 30th June this year, we're supposed to have congresses and conventions, when new officers of the party will be elected. But the NEC decided yesterday that the party cannot afford to go into congresses and convention at this time to elect new officers in view of the natural rancor that usually attends such exercises. And in the year preceding an election, we felt that would be a politically stupid thing to do. And that was why NEC approved that from June 30th this year, for another period of 12 months, all national officers and state officers of the party should proceed on an acting capacity for a period of 12 months. My understanding was that the NEC decided yesterday that tenure should be extended by another 12 months. And there was not a single person in that place yesterday that said the action taken by the NEC was invalid. Issues of constitutional correctness was raised, and what was agreed was that it was incumbent on the NEC to take that decision to resolve the issue of tenureship. Then whatever issues that attend to it, whatever issues of legality that attend to it, will be addressed as part of the process of constitutional amendment that the party is embarking on. What is important here is that majority of NEC members, as a matter of fact, 144, if I'm right, 144 members of NEC yesterday voted in support of tenure extension for executive officers, while only 4 voted against. So it was more or less a unanimous action that was taken. I think the issue of technicality or constitutional technicality that's been raised is just after matter, by people who had different consideration from what happened. It's easy when you are looking from the outside to read meanings and interpretations to this, but they are nothing more than coincidental absence. The previous night, to my understanding, the previous day he was in Edo to attend this conference on migration. And the following day, I think he had another commitment elsewhere. So it wasn't a deliberate attempt to absent himself from the NEC meeting. I have relationship with him, I speak with him, and I know that it wasn't a deliberate decision to absent himself from the NEC meeting. He wouldn't do that. It's not that.
Abolji Abdullahi, spokesman of the APC there earlier. About 20 persons have lost their lives in a clash between Fulani herdsmen and farmers in Adamawa State. A former commissioner in the state, Sam Zadok, and 13 others were among those confirmed killed in the violence. Reports from the affected area say the herdsmen stormed Gwamba village on a reprisal attack, following a previous attack launched on them by the Bachama youths. The spokesman of the police command in Adamawa State, Uthman Abubakar, who confirmed the attack, however did not give the casualty figure, was saying he was yet to be briefed on the attack. In a swift reaction, soldiers who were deployed trailed the herdsmen and arrested 6 of them, while 10 others were shot dead after showing resistance. Well, for more on this story, I'm now being joined by Arise News analyst Jide Ojo. Jide, this is becoming a recurring decima almost on a weekly basis.
Daily, actually.
Where are we going with this?
Very unfortunate. Where do we go? It's $1 million question. This is not painting Nigeria in very good light at all. It's affecting our economy. It's affecting our social life. It's affecting our values. So much so that there is so much bloodshed that people are now having nightmares, even on a daily basis. High level of insecurity is not good for any economy. It deepens it destroys investors' confidence in such an environment, because nobody in his right sense will want to come and invest in an environment that is politically charged and highly insecure.
Why is it that Nigerians are becoming more intolerant? I mean, looking at the herders farmers clashes, we now see farmers, going after the herders, and the herders are now coming in a reprisal form of attack. what led us to this level? Because I know in the past, Nigerians are very, very tolerant. I mean, you do something, everybody will commit everything to God. Now, lives were involved. Its former commissioner of the state was killed in the process.
A number of factors, really. We need to put issues in context. Why are we having this phenomenon on our hands? It's because we failed to do the needful years ago. When there was that onset of desertification in the north, everybody thought it to be a northern problem. When the Lake Chad was drying up, as you saw in the last interview session we have with you have with the Honorable Minister, people felt unconcerned. Climate change,
not a problem.
Climate change has set in and dramatically changed the face of how we do things. Animal husbandry is no longer profitable being done within your backyard. You now have to go in search of grazing grounds. And the grazing routes have been overtaken by modern, the lands have been, civility has taken over, it's been portioned out, it's been parceled out
been urbanized.
for urban development. So now, there is a whole sector of the economy having to do with only animal husbandry, livestock sector. And they have been largely neglected over the decades. For more than 50 years, nobody looked their side. It was like you are on your own. But now they have had to fight for their livelihood. How could they do that? The certification has come in. The green great tree that was touted for many years has failed to be properly implemented as to cushion and halt the encroachment of the certification. Now you have a huge portion of the northern Nigerian affected by the certification, and there is no all efforts at afforestation has not yielded positive results because it was not sustained over the years. From the military era, it has just been more of rhetorics. And these people have to survive one way or the other. So water has to find its level. They have to seek greener pastures to graze their animals. And now we are talking ranching. We've been at it for 3 months now.
That's exactly where I'm going to.
There has not been any pilots.
The federal government is now proposing what it called what they call it cattle colonies. Now the cattle colony is actually, some people say it's a brilliant idea, to save the unrest in the north and the further encroachments of the herders down to the middle belt. And in a matter of time, if the desertification in the north persists, it will definitely get to the south. In fact, some of the southern states are already feeling the heat. So what, is it an option for us to revisit again?
Very well. You see, we just don't have time on our hands. This has taken heavy toll on Nigerians' values, on economy, on social life, on so many other things. There are so many costs to what is happening beyond the loss of human lives. Some people have lost their means of livelihood for life. Some have been maimed for life. Some are traumatized for life. And some have been displaced. Very huge population of displaced persons now. So the cost, both the social and economic cost, is very huge. So what are the alternatives? Let's fast track this issue of ranching. Now, the House of Reps said, if you want to go the way of colony, you are infringing on the Constitution. Can we have whatever amendments needs to be done in good time to take off? 13 states, at least at the minimum, has agreed to give land for either ranching or cattle colony. Can we start with those ones before you appeal to the entire 36 state governors to donate land? If we see, and Kano State government,
there's a political angle to that, and
there is, but
that's the reluctance.
Kano State governor was very open, a few weeks ago, to say that he has sufficient land for over a million
do we have enough pasture in that?
To pasture. So why have you not taken on that invitation and moved your cattle to Kano? So those states, the man in the governor in Kogi State, donated even 15,000 hectares of land when the government is asking for 5 hectares. Can you also start with that and see, let's have this, whether it's cattle colony you want to do or it's ranching you want to do give soft loan to these people. They are asking for financial succor to be able to set up their ranches because they said it's not very, it's capital intensive. Now, if you want to go the way of anchor borrowers that you are supporting, recall that just last week, federal government approved $1 billion for the agri sector. And that's huge. So what portion of that $1 billion can go to assist these herders to set up ranches or cattle colony so that they start, we now know if we are facing Boko Haram in the guise of S-men or we are actually facing S-men who are on destructive mission.
You know, so some of the opponents of the so-called cattle colonies they say that it's just like you're shying away from, you know, responsibility. If you take a look at some of the, you know, countries in the Sahel region, the desert region, or the Middle East, for instance, like Dubai, it was it used to be a complete desert. But the government, they were very, very scientific about it. And if you go to Dubai right now, you will never know.
What of Israel?
Now,
Israel
the
used
same
to be
thing.
a desert.
So if we continue to give the cattle herders, you know, land for them to, you know, put their cattle and, you know, and all of that, it's just a matter of years from now, desertification will definitely meet the south. So what are we doing to make sure that we tackle desertification in the north so that we can bring the green grass, the pasture, back to the north?
Exactly. You see, there are multi-pronged approaches. You have to have short, medium, and long-term approach to this issue. In the immediate period, can we start ranching? If you want, first we need the legislation. Few states, Benue, Taraba, and Ekiti have passed their anti-open grazing law. Now, Adamawa has no anti-open grazing law, but we can have a national legislation that talked about options available to livestock farmers to say you either go ranching or you take advantage of cattle colonies or you take advantage of irrigation facilities. If we have all these earth dams and do proper irrigation, or if we need to pipe, some people have also said, can we pipe water? But my fear is Atlantic water, as the Honorable Minister for Water Resources said, is saline, is salty, and may not be able to, it may not be good for irrigation. But if there is anywhere around us where we can pipe fresh water to do irrigation and make sure that we have grass, if we have to import grass, so that at least these people, but I've also had this argument by Meati Allah Cattle Breeder Association that the breed of cow, the kind of which they are using to graze, cannot survive ranching. They cannot survive in a staying put in one environment. They have to be. But that is to say that while you phase out that old breed, you can have a more hybrid one.
Tell you what, you know, we can go on and talk about this, but I'm afraid we are running out of time. But thank you very much. I think in subsequent bulletins we'll be able to, you know,
it will be a pleasure to shed
more light on it. You've been watching Newsnight from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Time for us to go on a short break now, but do stay with us. Plenty more to come when we return.
The best way to predict the future is to create it. There's a special breed of achievers out there that are called tomorrow's people, the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They're bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow, strive for, and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
You're watching the Newsnight here on Arise News with me, Michael Kelly. At least 10 people have been killed and 15 wounded when two trains collided in Egypt's Bahia province. Reports say two passenger carriages separated from one train and collided with a cargo train in the northern province, while there have been strong complaints about failure to enforce safety regulations and a lack of improvement on the old network. In August last year, 42 lives were lost in the collision. To the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where scores of people are feared to have drowned after a convoy of boats sank in the northeast of the Central African country last night. Traveling on the waterways is common in the province of Mai Ndombe due to the poor state of the roads. Officially, there were 122 passengers on board, of whom 108 were rescued, leaving 14 unaccounted for. But witnesses say that there were more than 122 people on board on the boat at the time. A local politician, Didase Pembe, has warned that hundreds more could still be missing. Mr. Pembe has called on the authorities to provide medical care for the survivors. Now to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Jews have been protesting an Israeli decision to cut funding to help them immigrate into the country. Hundreds gathered to express concern that Israel's proposed budget removes the funding to help them immigrate to reunite with relatives. Most of nearly 8,000 Jews in the East African nation are said to have family members already in Israel. In a letter addressed to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Jews in Addis Ababa said they want to immediately and without any preconditions go to Israel. In 1991, with Ethiopia in civil war, Israel successfully airlifted out some 14,500 Jews in less than 2 days, and in 2015 pledged to bring the remaining Ethiopian Jews to Israel. Well, the late U.S. evangelist Billy Graham has been brought to lie in states at Capitol Hill ahead of his funeral on Friday. Graham died last week, aged 99. His thoughts as one of the most influential religious leaders over the last few decades. He pioneered the modern-day crusades and outdoor praise and worship sermons. President Donald Trump, House Speaker Paul Ryan, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell were at the Capitol Hill when Graham's body arrived to begin lying in honor beneath the iconic dome. Now let's take a look at business news now. United Bank for Africa, UBA, and China Development Bank, CDB, the world's largest development finance institution, have announced the signing of a $100 million 7-year loan agreement to finance the development of small and medium enterprises, SMEs in Africa. Well, Chairman of UBA PLC, Mr. Tony Elumelu, said in a statement that the fund will boost small and medium-scale enterprises across Africa, noting that the CDB's interest in supporting SMEs aligns with UBA's vision in growing business across Africa. The president of CDB, Mr. Zeng Zhejie, said the agreement is the beginning of the cooperation between UBA and CDB that will translate into an enduring business relationship between China and Africa, and with Nigeria in particular. Well, Wadea Shosami, our business analyst in our London studios, now join me to look at this new agreement between CDB and UBA. But tell us exactly we have seen China making significant, investment all over Africa and in Nigeria in particular. What impacts are we likely to see from this agreement, particularly in the small and medium enterprises sector?
Well, one thing we should also note is that China has had a lot of experience in lifting populations out of poverty and in addressing unemployment at a very large scale. So they understand this market very well, this micro, small and medium enterprises market. They know the characteristics of these types of loans, how to give them. They understand what to watch for, even where you have very, very informal structures. And the World Bank has done a lot of work to reveal a lot of the practices and the experience that is in China in lifting out of poverty. Beyond the money, I am hoping that that experience can be brought to bear in the Nigerian situation, where we've done a lot of this in the past before, where banks have treated these as small loans that will eventually turn bad, rather than see them as a completely different type of facility with different characteristics. So I'm hopeful, because it's China and the experience they have in this area, I'm hopeful that as we see more of these types of cooperation and we get support, not just in terms of financing, but in terms of how to manage and how to build this sector, I think we should begin to see much more impact than we've seen in the past.
All right, Bade. What are the challenges of SMEs growth in Nigeria? And when you look at, the huge chunk of amount of money that's been voted in support of the MSMEs in Nigeria, some may be skeptical about whether that money is going to go down the drain. What's your take on that?
Well, it's not just about the money, and I agree with you. Pouring money at a problem does not solve it. And growing the SME sector, although one of the major challenges in Nigeria is the inadequacy of long-term affordable funding. So we're talking of funding at a rate that is affordable, certainly a single-digit rate, with incentives like tax-free holidays and so on, and then capital that you can have for 5, 7, 10 years. So the market does not have enough of those types of funds. So that is certainly one challenge that exists. We don't have as much long-term funding to manage. I mean, if you look at the scale of what is going to be required for this sector to take off or to grow. So that is one major challenge. Of course, another major challenge is obvious. Everyone knows infrastructure. If you don't have electricity, or if your light isn't working, your bakery won't work, your generator will break down, and so on and so forth. So the problem of weak or inadequate infrastructure, particularly in Nigeria, becomes a big issue for many of these companies that have to use generators or have to resort to other ways to deal with their issues. And not just infrastructure in terms of electricity, having structures that make lending easy, like collateral registers, information on markets, and so on. Not very elaborate, but at a very rudimentary level. And a lot of these are not there. And then the third, perhaps most important challenge, although I think all three are equally important, is the lack of skills. And we're not talking of a BSc or anything very fancy, but basic occupational skills, education up to secondary level that allow people to understand very basic bookkeeping, how to run a business, how to start a business, how to market your business, and the basic aspects of accounting and so on. And you may think it's not so important, but just putting money in someone's hands and telling them to go and do business when they don't understand how to go about these matters can result in all kinds of unpredictable outcomes. Many of them, by the time the money starts coming in, they just begin to spend it thinking that's what they should do, but they just don't have the education. And countries that have put education first have always done well in SMEs, and we should watch places like South Africa and Ghana, for example, where they now have free education up to secondary level. A lot of the teaching, the courses would address things like how to start a business, how to start your bakery, things that people can do, and so on. So skills is definitely a very big area. And you know, skills is an invisible thing. You don't really see it until things go wrong. But clearly, those three are big challenges, and it's not just the money that you're throwing at them. If you don't find ways of addressing these issues, the SME sector just wouldn't take off as well as you want it to.
Well, Bode, I tell you what, the investments, the huge investments that we get from China is well documented. I mean, all over Africa, you see Chinese projects, you know, and all of that. At the same time, there's this general skepticism about, you know, Chinese coming to dominate, and not just that, but also, you know, holding the country hostage, so to speak, you know, for so many years. Now, should Nigerians be worried that recipients of these funds will be compelled to use Chinese inputs, and why the focus on strengthening relations with China?
Well, we have to be very realistic. The way I see these issues, these are not missionaries. You have to have a win-win when you are doing a lot of this development funding. And the win-win is that for China, there has to be something for them. And whether it's China, whether it's the UK, anytime funding comes from another country in one way or the other, there are always these clauses. For example, maybe a portion of the money would be spent in their own industry to at least help their own value chain. I don't think this is negative. You have to get the inputs from somewhere if you have to import them. And why not China if the money is coming from China? I think rather than be too overly suspicious on issues like this, I think the important thing is to train the banks and also train those who be getting this money to do their own diligence to ensure that this money is paid back. That means it delivers what it's supposed to deliver, whether it comes from China or it comes from Bulgaria or it comes from the United Kingdom in terms of the raw materials or whatever. I'm not sure that should matter much, but we'll be naive to think people are going to pour huge hundreds of millions of dollars into our country when they can't get anything back. I think we shouldn't just think that's going to happen. It won't, even for the UK, a lot of their financing has all kinds of clauses that makes you trade with the UK to get that money. So the same will be for China.
All right, thank you very much, Bode Oshosami, for your concise analysis about, you know, the partnership between UBA and CDB. Thank you very much, Bode. And going on to other news now, in Namibia, the state-owned airline is facing collapse with banks refusing to grant the carrier credits to fund day-to-day operations. It comes as Air Namibia has failed to publish annual reports for over 10 years. Officials say that the company is suffering severe cash shortages made worse by the recent decrease of government funding, while the Southern African nation has been slashing spending to fend off rating downgrades. Or the airline is now looking for financing from other countries, including South Africa. Now, Ghana is to certify the value of gold exports as part of efforts to tighten controls on the sector and ensure the state receives due revenues. Ghanaian law requires that the state run precious minerals marketing company test and validate minerals before exports, but companies have previously been assessing the materials themselves. But the government is also considering passing a law which would see at least half of Ghana's gold outputs refined locally within 5 years. While data from the central bank shows Ghana earned almost $6 billion from exports of metal last year. You're watching news now here on the Rise News. I'm with me, Michael Kadi, Nigeria's capital. We'll take a short break now. When we return, entertainment and sports are next. Now to entertainment. The just concluded 68th Berlin International Film Festival saw Rwanda filmmaker Samuel Ishimwe winning the Silver Bear for Short Film Jury Prize for his film Imfura. Infero is the first Rwanda production to be included in the competition of Berlin Shorts. The film's hybrid form, its fusion of documentary and stage material, gives it a great sense of immediacy. It has been screened in the 36th International Film Festival in Uruguay and the 28th African, Asian and Latin American Film Festival. The Berlin International Film Festival is the largest film festival in the world. Its festival sold over 300,000 tickets and had 396 films in all the festival's various sectors. As the month of February ends, activities celebrating the Black History Month are being rounded off. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and the time for recognizing the central role of blacks in U.S. history. Well, since 1976, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month. Other countries around the world, including Canada and the United Kingdom, also devote a month of celebrating Black History Month. Although there was a time when being black in America referred to descendants of survivals of transatlantic trade as slave trade, the number of African and Caribbean blacks immigrating to the U.S. has increased, and now many blacks or African Americans are first or second generation immigrants. Professor Chudi Uwazurike, a senior research fellow at the Institute for Governance and Leadership in Africa, joins me now to look at the Black History Month. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us on Newsnight. Now, first of all, what's the significance of Black History Month? Why Black History Month?
Very good question. It has become a major tradition in America as well as around the world. Even right in Nigeria, there is several celebrations of Black History Month. But very clearly, it is a tradition that has grown up since the year 1926 to mark the success of one of the most important events in human history, the formal abolition of slavery by the United States, what is called the 13th Amendment in the year 1865. And in 1926, this celebration started, and it was designated an official holiday in 1976. It is an attempt to recognize, as your initial commentary correctly depicted, the enormous contributions of African Americans, black people who originated from Africa as captives, not so much as slaves. They became enslaved when they reached there. But they were cousins, brothers, our people, essentially caught up in a web of confusion, warfare, and pillory. That was the situation between the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, almost 500 years. Well over 20 million blacks were shipped. 500,000 survived. And these are their descendants, at least in the USA. So this is, and again, they have contributed a lot. Not just Martin Luther and the civil rights activities that benefited everybody.
But that brings me to the question. The African Americans, or the so-called blacks in America, have they made significant progress since the inception of Black History Month decades ago?
Oh, they have. Since 1976. Enormous achievements in space engineering, in the business world, a lot of them now on Wall Street. There are black billionaires, even though we in Nigeria don't even know much about some of these people. As a matter of fact, part of the reason why one is keen is because our own people here in Africa really don't know enough about what is going on in terms of achievements. Much of what we have will always be negative news and so on. But the black middle class is very solid. The university professors, when I was at Harvard, some of the professors were African Americans and so on. And this is like years and years ago. And the same thing when you go to Oxford or Cambridge and so on, or Yale. In the business world, in the field of engineering, space technology, there are over 30 to 50 major inventions, including the street light, including the gearbox for cars, several other things invented by black Americans. Largely because they bear Anglo-Saxon names you never really know unless you're told. And of course, you know that blacks dominate sports. That was no mean achievement. Nobody gave that to them. You know, when the first black boxers began to beat everybody else, that was news. That was a big thing. Nobody expected it. They were supposed to be looking down and not achieve anything. But my problem is that it is about time Nigeria, as the leading black nation, begins to show its own global Pan-Africanism in a much more stout manner.
And that also brings to mind in 2008, history was made in America and in the world as well. A first black American president.
Absolutely.
But some people have criticized Barack Obama, former president of the United States, for not paying enough attention to the needs of blacks in America.
Well, that's hard to dispute. That's hard to pass on without a dispute. Largely because you don't become an American president on the basis of either clan or tribe or ethnicity or religion. You're the president of everybody. And he was president for the Democrats, and coincidentally, a lot of blacks are Democrats. So whatever he did that was good for Democrats, arguably is good for blacks. The black middle class is very solid, it's more established. But his election was an emotional journey which simply completes the circle of the acceptance and acceptability of blacks in the power equation. They were excluded before. Barack Obama broke that barrier, a barrier that nobody was expecting, but everybody embraced eventually. Nobody does everything. But there's no question that in terms of black home ownership, in terms of the size of the black middle class, black school attendance, black businesses, a lot of the barriers have been removed. And it's up to the current regime under Donald Trump to protect some of these things, because these are laws that protect those who perhaps don't have access to power. If they're removed, it's a problem. But I think he did fairly well. Now, we have issues in the continent with some of the policies, but that's a whole different thing.
It's a whole different thing. But lastly, before I let you go, there's been this debate around who is an African American. In fact, because of a negative stereotype of being black in America, some immigrants who are not born, or perhaps maybe their grandfather or their older generations did not emanate from America, perhaps. Do have some sort of complaints of institutional racism against them, because for instance, we have Nigerian Americans, for instance, but you have the African Americans who will want to discriminate against other blacks that come perhaps from another country.
You look at it as part of the byproduct of the insufficient information between the various groups before they come in contact. African Americans are clearly part of the American landscape, and they too are struggling for air, as it is. And then, of course, you have the Afro-Caribbean that are coming in good numbers, and now you have, since 1960, but much more determinedly since 1980, you have a lot of Africans who are now part of the black diaspora and so on. They have to work together. They just haven't collaborated, and almost all the news about each group is negative. So the perception of Africa by the African Americans, of course, is negative. The perception of African Americans by those of us here is also fairly negative, and so on and so forth. It's a problem, and it's a divisive problem. But Black History Month enables people to get together, see what has really been done, and then mutually appreciate each other's achievement. Otherwise, we all lose.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Chudi Uwazurike, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Governance and Leadership in Africa. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on Black History Month. I wish we can go on and on about it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, from entertainment now to sports news, champions Plateau United secured top positions in the Nigeria Professional Football League following a 1-0 win against Enugu Rangers in their rescheduled Match Day 9 fixture at the News Jos Stadium on Wednesday. Former Under-23 Eagles defender Chizoba Amefuele scored the decisive goal 13 minutes before the end of the game. The Jos club, who previously occupied 6th position in the table, now sits at the top of the log with 18 points. Kennedy Boboye's men are yet to concede a goal at home in the MPFL this season. In other results, Akwa United lost away to From home to Lobby Stars by lone goal, and in Akure, Sunshine Stars boosted their survival hopes after edging out MFM FC 2-1 in a keenly contested game. Arsenal have recorded a £25.1 million profit after player sales eased the cost of missing out on the Champions League. The club's latest financial figures, which account for 6 months leading to November 30th, 2017, show a £23.4 million drop in turnover after the Gunners failed to qualify for Europe's elite club competition for the first time in 20 years, while the summer sales of Oxlade Chamberlain, Karen Gibbs, Gabriel and Wojciech Szczesny contributed to just under £60 million in profits, while an increase in players' wages resulted in higher running costs. Only the arrival of Alexander Lacazette was offset against players the patches, as the club record signing Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was not taken into account because he joined in January. You've been watching Newsnight here on the Rise News with me, Michael Kadi, in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Please keep it here on the channel. But from now, from me and the entire team, it's good night.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lion.